I'm Will Aubrey. I'm here with my buddy Joe Darnell. It's time for another edition of the Improbability Engine, and we start, as always, with our moment of what?
Mine's going to be kind of a sad moment of what ESPN laying off 100 on-air personalities, guys like Andy Katz and Eamon Brennan. For basketball guys like me, it's hard to kind of fathom the world of sports journalism without those guys being front and center and having a predominant role. And you wish them the best. You know they're going to land on their feet. They're very talented individuals, and they're going to do fine. But it marks a turning point in the history of sports journalism, and it's one that matters. So,
and the reason for it, they've shed 10 million subscribers over the last 3 years due to cord cutters.
Yeah.
And the landscape of television is changing the way that the landscape changed for newspapers 15 years ago.
Absolutely.
And those who do not adapt will become extinct.
Yeah. The good news is for those folks, we're starting to see how the music industry has adapted from the album, cassette, CD phase to the world of digital music. They had some really rough patches to begin with, but they've started to come out of it, and they're actually making money again. So there are methods in place for entertainment, companies to thrive.
And one for music that nobody mentions is on YouTube. They have these official music videos that ads play on, and those get millions and millions of views. I saw one the other day that had something like 35 million views.
Absolutely. Streaming services are huge, and you can make money with them. It was just a matter of time before a company figured out how to make money on that stuff. But a big positive that ESPN can go with.
My moment of what was watching PTI yesterday, and Mike Wilbon said that Rajon Rondo was a Hall of Famer.
I think that's probably right.
No way. That's insane.
I think that's probably right. I think
that's
first
crazy.
and foremost, let's just take away his attitude, okay? All the stuff that's attitude-based. Let's look only his performance. The man has how many rings? 4, 3, 2? How many did he win with Boston? One with Boston? That's all he got with Boston? Okay,
so I think he has one.
Okay, so I'm looking at it from that standpoint. He's met that threshold. He's been on some of the best teams of his generation.
He averaged 12 points and 6 assists for his career.
Okay.
And he can't shoot.
Since when has that mattered?
It matters to me.
It matters to you. I say he probably is. He was, especially with the longevity of his career, I would say he's one of the best point guards of his generation and should be considered for the Hall of Fame.
Okay. I say you're insane, but we'll move on. And so as has been the case for the last couple of weeks, we're going to talk about the Missouri Valley Conference and the chance that Murray State has to join it. And the biggest news for me today is an article that I saw from a radio station website in the city of Milwaukee that said that Missouri Valley Conference officials would visit the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee next week. Now, the reason why that's news is a lot of people had been thinking that a decision would be forthcoming late this week, this weekend, first of next week, something like that. That does not appear to be the case. I think you're probably looking at the following week. If they're visiting Wisconsin-Milwaukee next week, then it's either the following weekend or the first of the following week, around May 9, May 8, in that range before there's a decision.
Well, and you can look no further than their last round of expansion. It took them about a month between the time that Creighton left and bringing Loyola in. I'm going to use that as kind of the brackets that we've got here. I don't think that there was a surprise. Might have been a surprise that Creighton left. I don't think it was a surprise that Wichita State was going to leave. I think it was a question of when, not if, with Wichita State. So you've got to think that they've got the powers that be at the Missouri Valley Conference head office have probably got an idea of teams they were going to look at. If I'm then, I make some phone calls to those teams right as soon as I know that Wichita State's leaving. Just gauging interest. Are you interested at all? No, yes, whatever. Put you on a short list. Okay, these are the teams that are interested that we're also interested in. Let's set up visits and see what we're looking at with all these schools. And then we'll come back in a month's time and select who we want of the people who we know are interested and we have some information on of them. So I think we're looking at a month's time frame. So, that first or second week of May is probably the right time frame to get that right. But when we're looking at these teams, Will, I mean, I've heard so many teams mentioned. And let's just start with, we really need to break them down into tiers.
Okay, but I think the 4 that I've heard mentioned receiving visits or about to receive a visit are Nebraska, Omaha, Valparaiso, Murray State, and Wisconsin, Milwaukee. Yeah. Now, Missouri, Kansas City has been mentioned as a possibility, but I haven't seen anything about anyone reporting that they were getting a visit.
And there might even be a couple more that would receive a visit, but I just can't think for the life of me who they would be. There's been no movement towards the Dakotas.
Right.
For all the talk out of the Dakotas, there's been no talk outside of the Dakotas about any of the Dakota schools coming in there, mainly because it seems like those schools want to be together in a lot of their stuff. So,
and there's no way they'd add more than one of them.
No, you really can't. I mean, none of them really jump out at you as, oh, that team's got to be in the talk, especially if they're trying to bring along another one with them. So I think those schools are kind of just on the outside looking in on this one. So when we're talking about these, if we were to add UMKC, just because they have been visited before, Valpo was also visited before, so I mean, maybe they're in, maybe they're not. But you've got really the 2 teams that stand out are Murray State and Valparaiso. Those are your Tier 1 schools. Those are the ones that you look at it, they've got success in the number 1 sport in the Missouri Valley Conference, men's basketball. They've got support from the community that they're in. You get into some real semantics once you get down to the bottom because Valparaiso is a private school.
Right.
Murray State's a public school.
Right.
Those could be important.
Well, it could be. I've talked to probably every president that Murray State has had since I've been working with Racer Insider. I've done interviews with them. And it may not matter to fans whether a school's private or public. It matters a lot to school presidents, and they're the ones who are going to vote on this.
Right.
So Wichita State was a public school. If they just add one, I'm betting it's a public school.
I think that's probably a real choice. I think that's a real decision-making point for some of those presidents. I would say that not adding Valparaiso is probably a mistake. If you've got the opportunity to bring Murray State in and Valparaiso in, you kind of have to bring them both.
I think there's more sizzle with those 2 than you get with anybody else.
Well, otherwise, one of the things you're looking at here is Wichita State leaves. If you only bring one team in, that team is now replacing Wichita State. Right. That's a lot of pressure to put on there. I mean, look at Loyola. Loyola might be a good ad. They might be. But when you compare that to when Creighton left and the void that Creighton left in the Missouri Valley, and then you fill it with Loyola, I think Loyola's gotten a lot of really bad, a lot of really poor thoughts about Loyola going forward. A lot of people talking smack about Loyola and, well, they don't draw anybody. They're in Chicago and nobody cares. They're not very good, so on and so forth. I think Loyola can be a really good ad. But if you just bring Loyola in to replace Creighton, that's a lot of pressure to put on Loyola. They're not going to be Creighton. Anybody who thinks they are is going to be disappointed, and they're going to be highly negative.
And anyone who expects whoever they bring in to be Wichita State suddenly is going to be disappointed.
Exactly.
That's not going to happen.
Exactly.
Now, they could become Wichita State in 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And if you look at the 2 breakout programs from the Missouri Valley, Creighton and Wichita State, they didn't have a history of being that kind of basketball school. They got an incredible coach who elevated them and took them to the next level, Dana Altman. at Creighton and Greg Marshall at Wichita State. Now, Murray State arguably had that kind of coach in Steve Prohm, but we were in too low a league to break out as a result of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, the biggest issue, and I think that hurt in our retention of Steve Prohm. Now, I'm not saying that he wouldn't have gone to Iowa State, because Iowa State, post-Hoiberg, is a fantastic job. I mean, it really is. It's a good job. They support their program. They really care about it, and frankly, he's a great fit for Iowa State.
I know that he was quite disturbed in 2015 when Murray State went undefeated in the Ohio Valley Conference and could not get an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if this weighed into his decision, but it absolutely weighs into mine. The seeming lack of effort done by the Ohio Valley Conference brass to champion Murray State's cause at that point.
They don't seem to like us, do they?
Well, it doesn't matter if they like us or not. I mean, we're a client. You know what I mean? It shouldn't matter, but it does seem to be that way, yeah.
And my memory fails me a little bit, but there was one year where we were trying to get an NIT bid. They were working for a different OVC school to get an NIT bid that year.
And it doesn't make any sense. I mean, really, when you think about, if you can look at nothing more than the televised games. Now, some of that is absolutely not the league office. Okay, the games that are selected, not always the league office. But whenever the league office does the scheduling, and they put games like Murray State Austin Peay on midweek games where there are no students, where it's a holiday that students aren't in. They've done that. Where they televise those games. That you just can't do that. That is a glaring mistake. If the OVC, if ESPN had called and said, "Hey, look, we want to televise this game," you got to really do something special to get people to those games. Even at Murray State, which is far and away the leader in attendance in the Ohio Valley Conference, without the students, you're hurting. You're not. I mean, it just doesn't look as good on television. And then you've got times whenever it seems like the conference picked two teams out of a hat and had that game televised. Games between teams with under 500 records on television. I mean, stuff like that where you look at it and go, it's not just a Murray State problem. It's a problem with the conference, and we can't do that.
And I think it's clear that Murray State fans, 9 out of 10, want to go to the Missouri Valley Conference.
Yeah,
I've seen polls that reflect that. There doesn't seem to be any question about that, and it's understandable. Here's something you have to ask yourself.
Yeah.
It's clear that we want to leave.
Yeah.
If we don't get to leave, how badly does that hurt us in terms of the excitement our fans have about the upcoming season, and how badly does it hurt our standing with other OVC schools, if that even matters?
You know what? I don't think that Murray State's time in the OVC is long, regardless of what happens with the Missouri Valley Conference. That is how bad it has gotten in the OVC. You're looking at preference is the Missouri Valley Conference all day long. That's the preference. If under some scenario Murray State were to not be picked by the Missouri Valley Conference, and this is just my supposition, I have absolutely nothing to back this up, it's just me, and they leave the Horizon, there might be a push for Murray State to go to the Horizon. It doesn't fit with football, and it would open up a Pandora's box of problems. It would have to be solved, but the status quo is untenable in the OVC. That's part of the reason why you're seeing the excitement when we're talking about the Missouri Valley Conference, because the OVC is not in a stable position. It does not make money. There are member programs and member institutions that don't want to spend money or can't spend money. You're looking at Eastern Illinois is a great example. Eastern Illinois has a great football tradition and actually a pretty good basketball tradition. They don't draw. Their enrollment's not great. And they're facing pressures from the state that are detrimental to their future. Tennessee State doesn't fit. They're great. The fans at Tennessee State are awesome. They are a fantastic school as it comes to support. They do love their teams, and they've had success. They've hired some good coaches, but they don't play a full football schedule. They often underspend compared to other teams. Jacksonville State has made no bones about the idea that they want out of FCS football.
So does Eastern Kentucky.
So does Eastern Kentucky. You're looking at stuff that you look at this conference, and what looks like a stable long-term conference and has been is being pulled apart in different directions.
If schools get their way, Murray State goes to the Missouri Valley, Jacksonville State goes to the Sun Belt or CUSA.
Or SoCon.
And although I think the first two are more likely because that's FCS football.
Right.
Eastern Kentucky goes to the MAC. That's what Eastern Kentucky wants.
They want that. I don't think they'll ever get it. I think the problem with Eastern Kentucky is their political situation. They're too close to Lexington.
True. And plus, the appeal that they might conceivably have to the MAC has waned over recent years with the collapse of the fortunes of their football team.
Right. No, that's the big thing is not only their basketball team has been middle of the road to, we'll just say middle of the road. I mean, because that's about right. They've had some pretty good teams come through, but their football has steadily declined since the retirement of Roy Kidd.
Absolutely.
And which is kind of to be expected. Roy Kidd was a legend. He's a great coach, and national championship, fantastic coach. But since those times, it has not been the same EKU. I wonder what the financial situation looks like for EKU if they were ever to try to go to that bowl subdivision. But I don't know. Jacksonville State has shown that they have a desire to do so. The problem is all the football moving up is not the most stable. I mean, you can look at the Sun Belt and Conference USA. Their revenues are falling. Their costs are tripling. It's not. I wouldn't make a decision like that. Which leaves Murray State, which is the basketball school in the conference, aside from Belmont. But Belmont has shown that they're completely fine just being
what they are.
They have no desire to go anywhere else. They've had opportunity.
Clearly, we don't know what decision the Missouri Valley Conference is going to make. I think the more schools they take, the better chance we have of getting in.
I think that's right.
And I think the sensible thing for them to do is to take three. Take Murray State, Valpo, and then one of the population area schools, probably Wisconsin, Milwaukee, because not only is it a big city, but Marquette had been the flagship program in that city, and they aren't what they used to be. So
you could say the same thing about Milwaukee as well.
It's true, but you could at least argue that Milwaukee has an opportunity there.
No, I think that's probably right. I think the biggest issue that I have with Milwaukee is that if you bring in Milwaukee and you go to 12, it really messes up the division setup.
One other thing I want to discuss with regard to sports is, and you mentioned it in your moment of what, the television landscape is changing, and this could affect the amount of money that schools are getting from the NCAA in future years. It's possible. It depends on how the NCAA navigates the terrain over the next few years. But ESPN lost 10 million subscribers over the last 3 years.
Right.
Now, I don't think, by and large, those were sports fans. I think what you had was a situation where you had people who they bought a cable package, and ESPN was part of the package.
Right.
And ESPN gets $7 out of everybody's cable package.
Right.
Like if you're paying $35, $7 goes to ESPN. So, but you know, my wife, if I died, she wouldn't be an ESPN subscriber, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people, guys, gals, both, who aren't sports fans, and ESPN gets their money because they're part of the package.
Right. As
people cut the cord and go to a different way of getting their TV, it's going to be a real challenge for ESPN. I'm not sure, and it's going to be a real challenge for everybody, including local broadcast television.
Absolutely.
And I'm not sure how they navigate the future.
No, I think that's right. I think the biggest, that's one of the biggest draws for the Missouri Valley Conference, though. They've got a media contract with ESPN, with CBS, and with Fox that guarantees a number of games shown, and it's long term. It's got 7 years left on it. I mean, it's not something they're going to renegotiate next year,
right,
barring some sort of major catastrophe.
Right.
I don't think the OVC has that kind of pull. I know for a fact their TV stuff is not nearly as good as what the Missouri Valley Conference has. So from a timing standpoint, if your goal is to grow the brand of your school, now that can help you recruit, get donors, whatever, I think you've got to take advantage while it's still in place, the media package that the Missouri Valley Conference has. I think that's absolutely dire importance.
I agree.
I think the other part about that is you mentioned on the other side, you said, all the excitement we're seeing. If Murray State doesn't get into the Missouri Valley Conference, what happens? I think on the other side of that, if Murray State does get into the Missouri Valley Conference, it could be a boom to all those donors out there, the sports donors who are now looking at it going, oh, we're not complacent being that small school in Southwest Kentucky. We'll give more money. Because that's the big thing right now. We've got this pool of donors who are looking at Murray State, and a lot of them look at Murray State the same way they did in 1960 or 1970, and Murray State was good but a small. And so you have to build that positive momentum. You have to grow. Otherwise, bad things happen to you.
Anything else on sports?
No, I'm looking forward to figuring this out, and hopefully we'll have some kind of information for you the next time. But don't expect a decision anytime soon.
And that brings to a close this edition of the Improbability Engine.